So hello everybody. This is a special video I've prepared. It's mostly to show you the dangers and what is happening in media, academia, and in our institutions in general, and how it's becoming dangerous for our children and for our future in general. Because in the last few weeks, we've seen the left put their foot on the gas pedal on the road to fascism. Even though they say they are fighting fascism, but in my opinion, they are the fascists. By the push to eliminate encrypted messaging platforms, the conservative purge off social media, the arresting of political opponents, the asking the army for its political loyalty, media bias and information manipulation by the big news corporations in bed with government on this, the militarization of the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C., even now, 2 weeks after Joe Biden's inauguration, the National Guard is still deployed in the United States Capitol. But this video will be more about how media, institutions, and academia are pushing crazy and dangerous ideas to your kids, whether it's in elementary schools, high schools, but most importantly and most predominantly in universities. Okay, now let's start off with this example of Vice Media trying to unstigmatize pedophilia, or normalize pedophilia, if you will. And it says, pedophilia is a mental health issue. It's still not treated as one. This is a topic that scientists in the fields of mental health are not just uninterested in, it is actively repugnant. Okay? I'll read you just this paragraph over here. In the past several decades, researchers have arrived at new understandings about pedophilia, the sexual attraction to children. The sexual attraction to children. Folks, you have to understand how language is important, and these academics love to change language to further their goals or ideologies, dangerous ideologies. So here they formalized it as sexual attraction to children. But I'll be blunt about this. It's pedophilia is basically, pedophiles are basically predators that prey on children. Let's be clear about that. But I'll continue the paragraph. Pedophilia appears to be an inborn sexual preference, something a person does not choose and cannot change. A pedophile's attraction to children is consistent, not a phase, and they develop their attraction to children around the same time that other people develop sexual attractions. While researchers' knowledge has been evolving, access to widespread, up-to-date healthcare hasn't kept up the pace. Outside of the handful of researchers who provide therapy and medication to pedophiles, the barriers to finding an informed therapist or psychiatrist remain high. This has led to a hodgepodge of therapeutic approaches in the community, or people self-medicating like Parker did. Many pedophiles are only directed towards treatment in the context of the criminal justice system, where in some states, chemical castration is used on sex offenders. How many people agree with chemical castration for pedophiles? I'm sure it's high. The number is high. But whatever. We'll move on to a Washington Times article. Okay? This computer is slow. Sorry, guys. Shouldn't have done it that way. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. So, California Governor Gavin Newsom signs bill changing sex offender law. So now we went from how media push these crazy and dangerous ideologies. Now we'll look into how institutions and state governments are implying it or implementing it, California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a law that would give judges a say on whether to list someone as a sex offender for having oral or anal sex with a minor. The bill, signed Friday, would expand the discretion currently granted judges in statutory rape cases and was promoted as bringing fairness under the law to LGBTQ defendants. The current law, in place for decades, permits judges to decide whether a man should be placed on California's sex offender registry if he had voluntary intercourse with someone 14 to 17 years old and was no more than 10 years older than the person. But that discretion only applied to a man who had vaginal intercourse. The new change permits judges to use that same discretion when the case involves voluntary, oral, or anal sex. So basically, it's activist judges that now will choose who is a sex offender, and not by the pure form of the law. Again, trying to normalize pedophilia. So that's the government aspect of pushing these dangerous things, okay? Now, let's look into Facebook's role in all this. Now, I'm going to use pedophilia as an example. But Facebook does this same thing and has a double standard in many other subjects and many other political rhetoric. But let's go. So Facebook has absolutely no problem and easy in how they do it easily and fast, quick, to ban conservatives, ban and censor conservatives and conspiracy theorists quickly on their platform. But groups like Old Man, Young Girl, or Uncle Daddy, Old Man and Young Gay Group, Young Girl Seeking Old Man, Young Lovers, Young Girls and Boys Fans Club, Cute Baby Lovers. These are all groups on Facebook. Facebook, there's no rush in eliminating these groups. I even feel bad for showing you guys this because it's disgusting and it's frustrating. But it's just to prove the point that how quickly Facebook is quick to ban anything else. But pedophilia groups still active on Facebook. Okay. So now let's move on from that more taboo subject that nobody likes to talk about, which is pedophilia. Let's move on. And let's move more into the critical theory aspect of it that is being taught in university and that has moved on into our institutions and corporations. Whether it's critical race theory, gender studies, or the new one that I've heard from, fat studies, which is basically normalizing obesity, when obesity is probably, I don't know the exact facts, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the biggest killers in our society today. But I digress. So let's start with the ACLU, which is the Civils Liberty Union, the Associations of Civils Liberty Union. Okay, so basically in this Twitter thread, they tried to explain the 4 myths about trans people in school sports. Okay, so I'm just going to give you 2 of them. If you want to go look it up, it's easy to find on the internet. Okay, so fact 1 that they say is a fact. Trans girls are girls. They say the myth is sex is binary, apparent at birth. and identifiable through singular biological characteristics. So they say it's a myth that sex is apparent at birth. Identifiable through singular biological characteristics. Sometimes I'm speechless when I read these things, even though I've read it so many times preparing for this video, but it still puts a smile on my face. Let's forget about what they say is a fact. Let's just go on what they say is a myth, okay? Myth, what they say. Trans athletes' physiological characteristics provide an unfair advantage over cis athletes. So what they say is that trans athletes do not have an unfair advantage in sports. Oh, really? Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay. Let me show you a video here, and then you can judge for yourself if biological males don't have an unfair advantage on biological women. So watch here. In the third lane, in the middle lane, look at this one. Look at this one. Look at her features. Look at her strength. Look at her upper body, her legs. I'm asking the question. I'm not affirming anything. Do you think she has an unfair advantage on the other girls? I'll let you decide. Or, this one's interesting, okay? This is the story of Fallon Fox. Okay, somebody here that knows more about this may correct me if I'm wrong. But she transitioned, either it was in her late 20s or early 30s, okay? She transitioned from a male to a female to go fight in women's mixed martial arts. So anybody see a problem here? A biological male that was a male and that had testosterone throughout most of her adult life, and that in her 30s or late 20s, not sure, transitioned into a woman. Nobody sees here that this can be very dangerous? Well, she fought Tamika Brents. Look it up. Brent suffered a concussion and a fractured skull and had to receive 7 staples to the head. Okay? And you know what Fallon Fox tweeted last year about that fight? I enjoyed it. I love smacking up TERFs in the cage. For those of you who don't know what TERF means a trans, exclusionary, radical feminist. So basically a straight white woman, or a straight woman, if you will. Don't have to bring race into it. So she loves smacking straight women in the cage. Nobody sees a problem with this. That a grown biological man steps into a cage to fight a biological woman? And why? Because they're scared that somebody might call them a bigot or a transphobe or whatever word they invented now to describe people that find this illogical and based in zero common sense. I don't know. You guys judge for yourself. And for those of you who think this is an American problem and it only happens in the United States, well, here, it has arrived here in Quebec. Okay? Just look at the judgment that was made, okay, last week by another activist judge who should go into politics and leave being a judge to the people with more judgment. Okay? So this judge invalidated the terms sex, mother, and father from the civil code. Yeah. So sex, mother, and father have been eliminated from the civil code in Quebec. This is a Twitter thread from a lawyer. I'm just going to read you the 2 first paragraphs in his thread to give you an idea of this judgment from this judge. Thread on the Quebec decision on changing sex markers on birth certificates. This is a civil law case, so I can't comment on some legal issues, but there are factual and procedural points that are relevant across Canada and the world for that matter. In addition to the individual applicants, the parties were Center for Gender Advocacy, Eagle Canada Human Rights Trust, LGBT Family Coalition, and the Gender Creative Kids Canada. These are all foundations. All four parties on the same side with no public representation of the opposing view. So this committee was formed with only groups from the same political view, with no opposing view that can defend the other side. And this judge still made this judgment, eliminating sex, mother, and father from birth certificates and the civil code. Folks, this has arrived here in Quebec, and it's only going to get worse if you, parents, don't stand up. Okay. So now, this was a bit of the gender studies aspect of this video. Now we'll go into the critical race theory aspect of this video. Okay? So what they're doing basically in schools and universities are they're indoctrinating your kids to think that they are racist, no matter how you, the parents, raise them. And separating everything by race. And a certain return to segregation and racism in its purest form. Okay? Let me show you this lady here, what she says, and I'll comment on what she says after.
When we talk about meritocracy, and especially meritocracy based on standardized testing, I'm just going to say it, in this day and age, we cannot mince words. Those are racist systems. Well, if you're going to say that merit, is like fair, it's the antithesis of fair, and it's the...
Okay, you don't need to listen to the rest. Okay, basically what she is saying here is that meritocracy, how can I say this without getting in trouble? What she is saying here is that blacks cannot succeed in a meritocracy. They can't be deserving of the success that they achieve. Think about it. Okay? She also says, her saying it, not me. She's saying it. Part of the school commission. She's board in the board of the school commission. She says that black people are not smart enough for standardized testing. Do you understand what that means? Or how racist that is? I don't see how this cannot be racist. That black people cannot succeed in a meritocracy, or that they are too dumb to pass standardized tests? Come on. Or even this is critical race theory in its purest form, okay? Cited in universities. Okay, this is how it goes. This is a paper, okay? It's was written by Terananian in 2000. Okay, while they may have initially been divided, this is about Jews in critical race theory and how they are looked upon by critical race theorists. While they may have initially been divided in terms of ethnic or class status, over time, European immigrants were united in whiteness. For example, early Irish, Italian, and Jewish immigrants were not considered white, but they became white as they assimilated into the dominant culture. Then she names and cites the people that wrote this, the critical race theorists that wrote this paper. Reflecting on the social and economic advantages of whiteness, critical race scholar Cheryl Harris, 1993, coined the phrase whiteness as property. This phrase captures the reality that being perceived as white carries more than a mere racial classification. It is a social and institutional status and identity imbued with legal, political, economic, and social rights and privileges that are denied to others. All right. Here's another one. In the book written by a critical race theorist, The Victimhood of the Powerful, White Jews, Zionism, and the Racism of Hegemonic Holocaust Education. Okay? This paper focuses on issues of Jewish identity, whiteness, and victimhood within hegemonic Holocaust education. I argue, Jennifer Peto, which is the author of the book, says that she argues that today Jewish people of European descent enjoy white privilege and are among the most socio-economically advantaged groups in the West. Despite this privilege, the organized Jewish community makes claims about Jewish victimhood that are widely accepted within that community and within popular discourse in the West. I propose that these claims to victimhood are no longer based in the reality of oppression, but continue to be propagated because of victimized Jewish identity can produce certain effects that are beneficial to the organized Jewish community and the Israeli nation state. I focus on two related Holocaust education projects, the March of the Living and the March of the Remembrance and Hope, to show how Jewish victimhood is instrumentalized in ways that obscure Jewish privilege, deny Jewish racism, and promote the interest of the Israeli nation state. Folks, these people that like to call everybody racists and Nazis, they are the racists. They are the Nazis. They're the ones who should be wearing the white hoods. Well, in fact, they were the ones wearing white hoods because Democrats founded the KKK in the early 1900s. But I digress. We'll leave that for another time. But who tells me the people that wrote these papers or that book are not racists or anti-Semitics? Come on. It's there. It's all in their papers. They don't hide it. Okay? Now, let's move on to the segregation part that is happening in universities and classes across elementary and high school. This was from a school, I think it's a Brentwood School, right? Yeah, Brentwood School for, I'm not sure in what state it is. I know it's in the United States, but I'm not sure which state. But look it up, okay? They have parents and families dialogue sessions. The following sessions are for current and former Brentwood school students, school parents and families. All times shown are Pacific Standard Time. Please select which session you plan to attend. You can leave this section blank if you are not a parent or guardian, blah, blah, blah. All right? So 6 to 7 p.m., Black parents and families. 6 and 7 p.m. on Thursday, January 28th, white parents and families. On Wednesday will be Hispanic and Latinx parents and families. Okay? So this is how it's separated, those meetings. So from 3:30 to 4:30, we'll have white faculty and black faculty, white staff and black staff, everything separated by color, divided by the color of someone's skin or its ethnic, where they're from, basically. Sorry, I'm at a mince for words over here. But basically separating everything by ethnicity. Why can't we just all be humans? We were getting so close to the dream of colorblindness, or Martin Luther King's dream of being judged by their character and not by the color of their skin. But whatever, I shouldn't even be talking about this because I am black, but whatever. So, and it gets crazier. Don't mind me. Watch this. Glenn Greenwald, which is a very respected journalist known internationally. Okay? He says on Twitter, the anti-racist advocates are speaking out today with particular righteousness. Okay? This is Imani Gandhi. She's a legal analyst with a blue check on Twitter, so she's a verified account. Petition to put cis white dudes, which is basically straight white dudes, on a barge and float them out to sea. How nice of her. And this other blue checkmark verified account on Twitter. I won't even try to pronounce his name. He says, "Fuck off already, white people. You enslaved and murdered whole continents. You have yet to make any amends, and even the good ones among pretend that's okay. We are still living in that world, and it makes the rest of us so sick and weary and disgusted with you." But I didn't know that I had enslaved and murdered whole continents. But okay, imagine if somebody would have said that about any other ethnicity or race. Right away they would have been, and rightfully so, crucified as a racist. But apparently racism against a certain group of people is not racism. Okay. So, that's a bit weird there. So, let's move on. So, James Lindsay, right? Which is the author of this book, Cynical Theories: How Activist Scholarship Made Everything About Race, Gender, and Identity, and why this harms everybody. All right? And he says here, because basically what is happening here is that because parents are starting to notice, because kids are getting home and telling their parents what they've learned in school, and parents are like, no. I won't have my children in these indoctrination camps that some people might call schools. Well, what are they doing? They're taking these kids out of school. They're homeschooling them, in some cases, if it's possible. And others are putting all their savings to bring their kids to private school, to get them away from these indoctrination camps that some people call schools. Okay? And now, since that is happening, these critical theorists, whether it's gender studies or anything, these academics or pseudo-intellectuals, if you may, are pushing for a ban altogether on private schools and homeschooling. So here James shows how Harvard School professor recommends a presumptive ban on homeschooling. Excuse me. Your children belong to the state, and because you may not share his progressive sensibilities, must not be able to escape woke indoctrination. So he says, Elizabeth Bartholet of Harvard Law School also senses danger in parents who may not share her political and religious views overseeing the education of their own children. She sees risk for children and society in homeschooling and recommends a presumptive ban on the practice. Notes an article in Harvard Magazine. And here, even in another tweet, Dr. Manza Keita, look her up, or him, I don't even know if it's a guy or her, sorry about that. Private and homeschools shouldn't exist. So basically, if you don't have the same political views as these academics or pseudo-intellectuals, then you cannot raise your children. They are going to raise your children. And by what I've showed you in this video of what they're teaching your children, do you really want these people raising your children? I feel lucky. There's nothing I want more in this life than to have a child or children in the future. But after seeing all this and seeing what they're teaching in schools, I don't know if it would be a good idea to bring children into this world. It's still something that I have to decide and really think about. But they say about what planet, I saw this somewhere on Facebook, we have to think about what planet we are leaving our children. How about thinking about what kind of children are we leaving our planet? That's important to think about. Okay? And James, in another tweet, he cites MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, basically that it forms engineers and mathematicians. Okay? And they cited in a paper Rochelle Gutierrez, sorry if I didn't pronounce that right, okay? While her having 0 degrees in math, thinks math ed and maybe math needs to be remade in a revolution and has recommended we learn math from plants. Okay, now I'm going to read you some things that she has written in her paper, which I might laugh because it shouldn't be funny, but it might laugh because it's so ridiculous. Okay? So, she says over here, every day we accumulate more evidence that humans are destroying the planet. We need only look at the increasing levels of air pollution, climate change, destruction of the ozone layer, and the elimination of various plant and animal species throughout the world to know that we cannot continue with the forms of living we have come to consider normal. However, not until recently have the public become aware that the effects will deeply impact us in our lifetime. Okay? This is funny. Okay. Sorry about this. Much of what currently counts as scholarship in mathematics education assumes we will work within the given system or expand what we currently count as the status quo. Within mathematics education, we have convinced ourselves that equity is a strong enough agenda when maybe revolution should be the goal. Elsewhere, Gutierrez, I have argued that equity harms our cause in mathematics education for a number of reasons, including A, it assumes we all mean the same thing and does not promote dialogue or creativity. B, it only guarantees we are addressing equity when we are far from reaching the goal. And C, it tends to privilege images of teaching and learning that are universal or that only attend to issues of access, achievement, or a bit of identity, but not power in any serious way. Basically, it's all about power. If you come to understand anything to do with critical theories or intersectionality or postmodernism, it's all based on power. Who has the power? Which is what they say. Okay? Now, this one is, let me get you this one over here. This one's going to be funny too. So, indigenous knowledge recognized that we are a part of a system of intelligent and scientific beings, also referred to as persons, with interconnected spirits, including rocks and bodies of water. Plants, for example, have lived on this planet for millions of years before humans. In that sense, plants are our older brothers and sisters and have developed ways of efficiently using space, relating with other living beings, and sustaining life, not just for themselves, but for others, often with few resources at any given moment. They have been able to withstand long droughts, communicate about impending dangers, and collaborate in order to protect others in the community in ways that appear to be selfless acts. Okay, let me skip over here a bit. Our choice to destroy the planet to serve our immediate capitalistic technology needs is a form of settler colonialism. Colonialism, that perpetuates violence. That is because a Western worldview does not consider plants, animals, and rocks as living beings of equal value with the same rights to this universe as humans. The result is that plants, animals, and rocks suffer the same treatment as indigenous peoples have endured throughout time. For example, like American Indians who were stripped of their lands and communities and forced to live in boarding schools, plants are yanked from their families and forced to assimilate into Western ways of doing things. Okay, guys, I'm not going to read no more because you get the idea. This is what is being taught in school, guys. Nobody sees the ridiculous aspect of this? Come on. Here is more from Rochelle Gutierrez. Okay, I am not suggesting that humans have gotten it all wrong and that by turning to other than human persons, we will get it right. My goal is not to get closer to some absolute truth about our world. Rather, learning with other person opens the door for us to have different lenses for viewing and relating with our universe and others. And in doing so, we have the opportunity to learn how different approaches, mathematics or mathematics with an X, make possible certain forms of knowing the world, recognizing that all of these forms are provisional, local, and legitimate. Even so, given the history of particular knowledges, knowers, and ways of knowing that have dominated in our history with respect to mathematics, it is important to give greater focus to the ways other than human persons live mathematics, or however you pronounce that. So, it is important to give greater focus to the ways other than human persons. Other than human persons. Nobody sees the oxymoron here? Other than human persons. Oh, wow. She goes on to say, identifying the problem, the relationship between mathematics, humans, and the planet has been one steeped too long in domination and destruction. I'll just read the highlighted parts because this video is getting long already. Mathematics often supports a fallacy that modeling, big data, and software can solve anything. In an attempt to change this relationship, Coles and colleagues suggest we begin by altering the forms of teaching and the curriculum to which students are exposed. Basically, she's saying to not teach math the way math has been taught for centuries. Math is pretty easy, no? Well, at least the basis of mathematics, where 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? Everybody can agree. That's what do you call them? Universal truths? Well, look at this. Kareem Carr, which I'll talk about in the last article that I will be reporting on. He writes in a tweet, okay, 1984, which is the book by George Orwell, is a great fictional work which many of us enjoyed as kids. And he has kids in caps, in all caps. I'm glad that the book was meaningful to so many, but at some point folks need to grow up, in all caps. We can't base serious adult conversations about mathematical truth on how scared we got while reading some book as a kid. And then he has an image of 2 plus 2 equals 5. Okay. So who is Kareem Carr? They did a piece about him in Popular Mechanics. Folks, Popular Mechanics. It's titled, Why Some People Think 2 plus 2 equals 5. Okay. Written by Caroline Delbert. So and then there's an image of 2 plus 2 equals 5. And then in parentheses, really? So critical armchair mathematicians are having a moment after a thread about the created nature of numbers spread on Twitter. Kareem Carr, a biostatistics PhD student at Harvard University, says that sharing his ideas about numbers and abstraction to a large audience on Twitter helps him find others who think differently and are excited about connecting theory to reality. I haven't found one person in critical theory that has been able to do that. To connect those theories to reality. Not one. So anybody, if you're willing to try to find a connection or that have found the evidence that they were able to connect one of these theories to reality, please comment in the comment section and link to this evidence. And while some bad faith critics have flooded his notifications with unkind assumptions, he's still happy to put his ideas out there. In his original thread, Carr points out some simple but provocative truths about the world. Our numbers, our quantitative measures, are abstractions of real underlying things in the universe, and it's important to keep track of this when we use numbers to model the real world, one tweet reads. Carr grounds in Carr grounds it in the real ways statistical models are being used to harm, for example, marginalized groups across many parameters. Whenever you create a numerical construct like IQ, or an aggression score, or a sentiment score, it's important to remember that properties of this score might not mirror the real things being measured. There's a need for this sort of thinking, because we're basically turning everything into data. Carr tells Popular Mechanics. Because we're turning more and more domains into data, it's becoming more and more important. If we're going to be a world that's just in apps, we need to be sure these things are working how we think they work. So this is I'm only going to read up to there. You get the idea of what they're trying to push right here. That they're trying to demonize empirical data. So anybody that studied science in any aspect of their education knows that empirical data is the basis to scientific research, right? So you have a thesis or a theory, you test it with data, and then you come to a conclusion. That's the process of scientific research. Well, now, because some people are bringing empirical data into question critical race theory, so now they're saying that empirical data is in itself racist. And what is empirical data? Basically, it's math. It's numbers. So they're even going as far as to try to change mathematics or completely reform it so that it more fits their ideology or their theories in ideology. And that's how dangerous these people are. The media, these public institutions, and including universities and academia, and these pseudo intellectuals, and what are they pushing to your kids. This is an important issue. I know a lot of people are not interested in politics. This has nothing to do with politics, folks. This is the education of your children and who gets to raise them. Are you allowed to raise your own children the way you seem fit? That is the question that is being asked here. And if parents don't start standing up, sorry guys, but I see a very dark future. And if you don't believe so, or if you want an idea of what that dark future can be, well, read 1984 by George Orwell, or my friend Marco Adornado's book, Silent Laughter. You might have an idea of what this future may